hello and welcome everybody to Movies for Dumb Guys. I'm your dumb guy host, Joe Johnson. And as usual, I'm joined by Ryan Sharp.
Life moves pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it.
And Tim Williams.
Get me a keg of beer.
You always got me wondering when you do yours.
What? You don't know that one?
Get me a keg of beer. What's that from?
I know
I
it.
figured Ryan would know.
Teen Wolf.
Yep.
Really?
Ding, ding.
Wow. All right. So if you haven't been able to figure it out by looking at my apparel, today's theme is going to be 80s movies, but not necessarily movies made in the 80s, even though, of course, that's going to be a big part of it. We're going to be talking about movies that kind of are the 80s in a nutshell, sort of a time capsule. Movies that showcase the hair and the fashions and the lingo and maybe the politics and the things that made the 80s so great. So that's going to be our focus today. Now, the 80s were a big deal for me. I turned 14 in 1980, graduated from high school in 1984. And so basically my teen years were going through the 80s, and it was a really great time to be a teenager in the 80s. Ryan, give me an idea where you were in the 80s.
Sitting at home.
Mm-hmm. How old were you?
I was 3 through 13. And so a lot of these movies that are on my list, a lot of the 80s stuff is very influential when I was growing up.
You were a child. Those were your formative years.
Yeah, and that might explain a lot because I watched a lot of these movies that maybe I should not have. But definitely a huge impact on me. It's where I developed an appreciation and love for movies and video and everything. And it's this list was extremely, extremely hard for me to do because there's just so many that I could pick.
I feel that some of the greatest movies ever made, a majority, in my opinion, of the greatest movies ever made came out in the 80s. There was some really great stuff in the 70s when I was a kid, but there's something about the movies of the 80s that were just so great and so memorable. Tim, where were you in the 80s? And talk about what your youth was like.
I was 8 years old in 1980, so you can figure the rest out. So I guess I would be considered an 80s kid, but I mentioned it before. I lived a couple blocks away from the Oxford Theater, so I saw a lot of movies because my mom would want me to get out of her hair on Saturday. So a lot of movies that I didn't even know existed, she'd just be like, "Here, go see this, go see this, go see this." So I saw a lot of movies from the 80s.
That was pretty good.
But my list today, I didn't really. My list today is more of movies that kind of have. Well, basically, I was thinking that the 80s owes me some kind of a refund because. I had it in my head, I'd see all these great parties in these movies, and I don't ever remember going to a party as good as like any of these in these movies.
I remember one time in high school, someone announced they were having a toga party, and I was all excited and I made a toga and put like a wreath in my hair and everything. Showed up at the party, and I was one of the only people dressed up in togas, and I'm like, well, this sucks. It went from such a cool idea, inspired by Animal House, to me being the only idiot at a party dressed in a toga. So, yeah, I see where you're coming from. All right. So getting to our favorite movies about the 80s, I'm going to start off with talking about movies that came out in the 80s. And number one on my list, and you guys might argue this a little bit, Back to the Future. Back to the Future, to me, is the ultimate 80s movie. Now, yeah, a lot of it takes place in the 50s, but what makes that so interesting is that there's this comparison about culture in the 80s versus culture in the 50s, and there's all these 80s references during the 50s, including
I'm telling the truth, Doc. You gotta believe me.
Then tell me, future boy, who's president of the United States in 1985?
Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, the actor? Then who's vice president? Jerry Lewis?
I heard a story that when they screened the movie for Ronald Reagan in his White House theater, or however they do that, when it got to that part, he laughed so hard he made the projectionist stop and replay the scene to back it up so he could see it again. And he absolutely loved that reference. But yeah, to me, Back to the Future just represents the 80s, was probably, gosh, one of the greatest movies, in my opinion, that came out in the 80s. And featured, fashion and all that stuff from the 80s. And it's kind of funny at the end when everything changes and Marty goes back to the future, and their definition of success is having the BMW car and having that Toyota 4x4 and stuff like that, the material things that people strived for in the 80s. So, yeah, I consider Back to the Future the ultimate 80s movie. Ryan, do you agree?
Not the ultimate, but it's on my list. It definitely was impactful to me. The opening scene right there grabs you with the big, huge speaker that blows out when he plays guitar. Great quotes, great acting. Definitely a good story. A lot of really interesting thoughts and how it affects the future and all the shenanigans that take place. So.
Of course, the Huey Lewis soundtrack. He wrote songs specifically for Back to the Future.
Just too dang long. Too dang loud.
too dang loud. The little cameo was awesome. And I think it was Bob Gale, who was the producer of Back to the Future, when they said, well, why Huey Lewis? And he said, I just thought that's the kind of band that Marty McFly would be into at that time. So that's why Huey Lewis had such a big role in the movie as far as music and stuff. Tim, your thoughts on Back to the Future?
No doubt it's a great movie. My thinking when I was compiling my list was more along the lines of big hair and neon and parties and drugs and stuff like that. And not all of mine are like that, but and then the other ones are like more of stuff that I could kind of relate to. Or if somebody mentions a movie, then it takes me back to that time in my childhood. So I do not have this on my list, but I mean, nothing against it. It's a fantastic movie, but it's just not what I was thinking when I compiled my list.
All right. Here's a little snippet from the trailer.
Steven Spielberg presents Back to the Future, a Robert Zemeckis film. Marty leads an ordinary life.
No McFly ever amounted to anything in the history of Hill Valley.
Yeah, well, history is going to change.
And 1985 is not his year. But Dr. Brown is about to change all that.
Are you telling me that you built a time machine out of a DeLorean?
He's sending Marty 30 years back in time.
It works! Precisely.
Michael J. Fox.
Whoa, this is heavy.
Christopher Lloyd.
There's that word again, heavy. Why are things so heavy in the future? Is there a problem with the Earth's gravitational pull?
Back to the Future.
All right, so that's the number one movie on my list. Saw it in theaters and just absolutely fell in love with it. Let's see. Next movie on my list, let's go to a movie that definitely shows off the things that made the 80s great. Fashion, hairstyles, cars, attitude, all that stuff. Play a little bit of the trailer here.
Bueller.
How could I possibly be expected to handle school on a day like this?
Paramount Pictures presents Matthew Broderick
He's a righteous dude.
in a new film by John Hughes.
This is my 9th sick day this semester. If I go for 10, I'm probably going to have to barf up a lung. So I better make this one count.
Ferris Bueller's Day Off, rated PG-13.
Definitely a time capsule of the 80s. Absolutely love the movie, love everything about it. It was pop culture phenomenon, and like I said, it incorporated a lot of stuff that made the 80s great. Ryan, do you agree?
I agree. It's really high on my list. I didn't necessarily rank these, but if I did, it'd probably be up there like 1 or 2. I mean, growing up, like, I wanted to be him. I love his smart aleckness, his quips, his wit. He got the hot girl, of course. Just everything about him was cool. And I wanted to skip school and have a day like that. So
He inspired us. Tim, do you agree?
Yeah, except I wanted to have a sick day and stay in bed all day like Cameron Fry was trying to.
But, you're not dying. Just can't think of anything better to do.
Let my Cameron go. But yeah, I have this as my number 7. And great movie. I specifically remember seeing it at the theater. It was probably like a Friday night, and it was just packed with everybody from high school, and everybody was cracking up. And I probably saw it more than one time at the theater. I'm sure I did, actually. And I used to watch it every time it was on cable. And yeah, just a good movie.
Definitely. All right. Now, Tim, you've mentioned that 80s party multiple times. So my next film I'm going to bring up is a movie about a party and made its star a star.
I'm getting married.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, let's have a bachelor party with chicks and guns and fire trucks and hookers.
A bachelor party for him.
Surprise!
A bridal shower for her. A night to encounter ex-boyfriends, ex-girlfriends, ex-men, and excitement.
Is that your special?
20th Century Fox invites you to witness a tradition no one will discuss in public.
That would be out of sight, dude.
A motion picture event you can't afford to miss.
This is the best 3D I've ever seen.
I've seen better.
Bachelor Party, starring Tom Hanks, a man's tradition every woman should know about.
Hey, it's dark in here.
Now, I was a fan of Tom Hanks when he was on a little TV show called Bosom Buddies. And there was just something special about the guy. I was obsessed with the guy. I just thought he was hysterical. And then he makes the transition to movies. Now, I believe Splash was his debut, his theatrical debut, and that made him a big star. And I like Splash. I was like, yeah, it's okay. But there was just something about Bachelor Party. I loved Bachelor Party. I remember going to see it with friends. Now, keep in mind, it came out in 1984. This is the year I graduated high school. And my friends and I go to the theater. We see Bachelor Party, and it's raunchy, and it's funny. And Tom Hanks is just like silly, goofy in this, almost manic. And he was just at his best, like just laugh out loud hysterical. The movies laugh out loud hysterical. And again, it has the 80s fashions, the hairstyles, the cars, all the stuff that made the 80s great. Absolutely loved Bachelor Party. Ryan, your memories of Bachelor Party and a young Tom Hanks?
I watched it way too much. I could quote this movie all day. I definitely picked up some characteristics. Like, there's never a time I've stepped onto a tennis court and I didn't hit a ball over the fence.
Like you're hitting a home run.
Like I'm hitting a home run, like Tom Hanks did. I still say stupid stuff like "Milt will come for you."
Actually, did you notice in the trailer? I don't know if you caught this. They changed a line in the trailer where the waiter comes up to the mom at the bachelorette party, and in the trailer she says, "Is that the special?" You remember what was said in the movie? She says, "Is that the foot long?"
Oh.
And he says, "And then some."
Oh yeah.
That was hilarious.
Should I call you Nick or Mr. Dick?
That's when he shows it, and they're all like, "Yes, all right." Man,
it was just. I mean, it had everything for me.
Adrian Zemed, man.
I was young, so there's like boobs, and that was awesome.
Tawny Katane.
I did there's a scene where Tom Hanks is dancing crazy, like he drops on the couch and does like the alligator, and I used to do that, so I definitely mocked this and thought it was I killed a mule. There's just so many great parts in this movie.
Yeah. Tim, your memories of Bachelor Party?
I did not see it at the theater. Well, I would have been too young to see it at the theater, but yeah, I discovered it on cable, I'm sure, because it was probably one of those when cable first came out, you would get the guide for the entire month. So you could kind of plan out your whole month, like, when your parents were going to be gone for the weekend, if there was a movie that, because it would tell you if there was nudity or adult situations or whatever in there. So you'd go through and make a little mental check mark that you would check those movies out. And so I'm pretty sure
I was always like, "Ooh, yeah, that one's a good one."
So I'm pretty sure that's how I discovered this. And I used to watch it. It's been so long, though, I don't really remember a whole lot about it, to tell you the truth. But I did watch it a lot, probably every time, I came by it when it was on cable. But I probably have not watched it since the 80s, but
yeah,
I did like it.
One of my all-time favorite comedies. Now, as I said, I graduated high school in 1984, and man, there were some great movies that came out that year. Some people argue that 1984 might be one of the best movie years in history. Some people talk about 1939, where Wizard of Oz and Gone with the Wind and a bunch of movies came out in 1939, but some people argue that 1984 might be one of the greatest movie years ever. Purple Rain came out in 1984. Ghostbusters came out in 1984. I already talked about Bachelor Party. Here's another movie that came out in 1984 that I feel really kind of captures the essence of the 80s.
Eddie Murphy is a Detroit cop on vacation in Beverly Hills.
I just got off the phone with Inspector Todd in Detroit. He says if you're out here investigating the Tandino murder, you needn't bother coming back.
I don't want to take it anymore.
For a man who claims to be on vacation, you look a lot like you're on a stakeout.
Stakeout? No. I'm picnicking. This is like a picnic area. Cover me.
Police! You're all under arrest!
You do that again, I'll shoot you myself.
Eddie Murphy, Beverly Hills Cop.
You can't talk about movies from the 80s without talking about Eddie Murphy. And when you think about his supporting cast there, Judge Reinhold was a staple of many 80s movies. Now, there's a number of Eddie Murphy movies that could easily be on this list, and I actually have a couple other on this list that I might let Ryan bring up. But for me, Beverly Hills Cop has to be the top Eddie Murphy movie of the 80s. Such a phenomenal hit, such a big deal, and it gave us Eddie Murphy in the movies. Now, he had his run on Saturday Night Live that made everybody love this guy. And then I think was 48 Hours came out first. Was that his film debut?
I believe so.
Yeah, but then Beverly Hills Cop was just this phenomenal thing, and Bronson Pinchot is the art guy and all that stuff. You can't discuss 80s movies without talking about Eddie Murphy and Beverly Hills Cop. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Beverly Hills Cop?
Well, I disagree with you, as you know, that it's his best. You know why? Because you just alluded to it with what movie I'm going to talk about. But having said that, I do absolutely love Beverly Hills Cop. It is hilarious. Great characters. Like you said, Bronson was hilarious. No, I cannot. Just a really entertaining, fun movie. Again, people still quote it. You're gonna put no banana in a tailpipe. Damon Wayans was the guy that gave him the banana.
Yeah.
Go ahead, take these bananas.
Yeah, go ahead, take these bananas.
So just so many great things, and just the little it was a phenomenal job of acting. The subtlety about the Super Cop thing was working.
Oh yeah,
the way that he delivered that line was I don't know. I think it was just really well done.
I love the one moment when Eddie Murphy goes into the restaurant to see Victor Maitland, and they're not going to let him in, and you see that transformation that Eddie Murphy makes, and he goes, "Tell him I have herpes simplex 10," and that he goes into that, and his posture changed, and the look on his face changed, and it was just a brilliant comedic performance. He was just absolutely amazing. Tim, your thoughts on Beverly Hills Cop?
Yeah, I didn't put this on my list again just because of it's not what I was thinking in terms of '80s movies, probably because I mean, looking at my list now, it's mostly stuff, high school stuff. Probably because that's when I grew up in that era. But anyway, yeah, the same thing. I remember going and seeing that at the theater also, and just everybody was just rolling and cracking up the whole thing, and I mean, it was cool that you had the Detroit connection there, and Gil Hill being the chief of police, and I mean, he did a great job too.
He was, yeah, and I remember when they filmed the truck chase. It was a big deal. Like, it was on the papers and on the news, and they're filming this movie in downtown Detroit. It was really exciting.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought, I mean, just the whole concept of it, I really liked, because, he's a cop from gritty Detroit, and L.A. does, or Beverly Hills does things a little bit differently in their PD. So, yeah, just the whole concept of it, I just thought was great. And, Eddie Murphy just knocked it out of the park.
I think some of the best 80s movies are the fish out of water movies, and there's a couple more examples on my list we'll get to a little bit later. But yeah, this was a perfect example of that Detroit cop in L.A. and having to do things by the book. Those are some of the best 80s movies because they really kind of underscore those 80s trends and stuff like that. Now, you mentioned that a lot of movies on your list are teenage-related, school-related, and I know we did a podcast on our back-to-school special, and we included a lot of those movies. So when you talk about 80s movies, there's another actor that comes to mind that has to be in any conversation about 80s movies, and that actor I'm talking about is Molly Ringwald. She was in multiple really great 80s movies. So I had to decide, well, which one do I want to talk about? Because they're all so great, but which one really kind of encompasses the 80s the best? And this is the one I chose.
Her name is Samantha Baker, and today is her 16th birthday.
Fred, she's gotten her boobies.
Oh, I'd better go get my magnifying glass.
They forgot my birthday. Classic. This is the single worst day of my entire life.
Universal Pictures presents...
Score, a direct hit.
16 Candles.
You say it's your birthday. It's my birthday too.
What's happening, hot stuff?
His name is Long Duck Dawn.
Nothing could shock me anymore.
Underpants.
Can I borrow your underpants for 10 minutes?
Girls' underpants.
Now, you might have thought I was going to bring up Breakfast Club, and obviously Breakfast Club is a great 80s movie, but the reason I chose this over Breakfast Club is because Breakfast Club's all self-contained in the school, and so we have those actors doing a phenomenal job, and they represent the different cliques or whatever. But 16 Candles really, I think, shows the 80s more, again, with the cars and hairstyles and fashion and all that stuff. So I think 16 Candles is Molly Ringwald's best 80s movie that really embodies the 80s. Ryan, do you agree?
Maybe. I have Breakfast Club and 16 Candles on my list. I think maybe Molly Ringwald was more of the star of 16 Candles, and maybe that's why Breakfast Club is more of that ensemble.
Right.
But I definitely love the movie. I think it's hilarious. The donger is great.
Automobile.
No more Yankee, my wanky. Yeah, just I remember so many things as a kid, so many great things. Anthony Michael Hall with the underwear, I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Him hooking up with Jake Ryan's girlfriend,
even though that might not fly today, but
right. Well, I mean, even nothing would fly. The grandpa saying, "Let me get a magnifying glass." Child Protective Services would be there, and he'd be in jail as a pedophile. So.
That scene is so damn funny, though.
There definitely would be no Long Duck Dong either.
No, yeah, right. No. Yeah. So
that's why it's such a perfect time capsule of the 80s and what was allowed back then.
Yep.
Tim, your thoughts?
Yeah, I actually have this as my number 2, and same thing. I was like, should I put Pretty in Pink on here? Should I put Breakfast Club on here? But out of the John Hughes movies like that, I think this one is my favorite. And I mean, just every actor. I mean, even like the smaller parts. I mean, the Cusacks and just everybody in this movie just was like the way they were cast, and so many of them got their starts in this movie, and just hilarious. I mean, just I don't know the whole thing with the grandparents and Paul Dooley as her dad was great. I mean, just everybody in this movie was just great.
And I would be remiss if we didn't bring up the name of Anthony Michael Hall, who, again, was another 80s staple. I mean, he had a run in the 80s where everything he touched was gold. It was awesome.
Yeah, him too. Now, did they ever say why they called him Farmer Ted?
I don't think I've ever heard the story. I don't know.
I don't know either. I'm asking.
Yeah, no, I never heard.
They never explained it in the movie, right?
Yeah.
I wonder if that was like a deleted scene or something.
Could be. I don't know. All right, so those are 5 quintessential, if that's a word, 80s movies on my list. I have some more to talk about. We'll try to get to them a little bit later if we have time. But for now, I want to go around the table and throw it over to Ryan. What do you got?
Well, if anybody's ever listened to the podcast, it'll come as no surprise that my number one 80s movie is the underdog that you root for, Crew Jones, in Rad.
Awesome.
All right.
Go ahead, play your stupid stuff.
Okay.
Super funny. Makes me laugh every time. So when I was a kid growing up, can this stop?
There it goes.
Next time, try to find a little longer clip. When I was a kid, I was into BMX racing. So I actually was a nationally ranked BMXer. I competed every Saturday. I had trophies. It was a big part of my life. So when a movie came out about bike riding, of course, it kind of was like, oh, that's my thing, because that was my hobby. So it was a great movie at the time. It was really cool to see these guys doing these amazing tricks on these bikes. The story was, small town guy trying to make it against all these factory riders and going up against the big bad, evil Bart Connor. So I just really enjoyed it. I watched it not too long ago. I still enjoy it. It held up because the tricks are still really cool. Bikes haven't really changed ever. So it's just a great movie from start to finish, and shame on you guys for not giving it a chance.
What year did it come up?
That I don't know.
All right.
I honestly, I plan on watching this at some point because I do want to see it. And I may have seen it and just forgot about it, but yeah, like the 80s, that just reminds me of like a lot of, I mean, was there any other BMX movies? It seemed like that would have been, like that would have been like a big thing in the 80s for like, especially after that movie came out. I mean, I don't know how well it did financially, but it seems like, I mean, you had Hot Dog come out. It seemed like you had a lot of ski movies. Yeah, that's what I mean.
There was a ton of skiing movies.
Yeah.
There was a couple skateboarding movies like Gleaming the Cube.
Mm-hmm.
There was the Dirt Bike Kid.
Oh yeah.
Right. And that's like it that I can think of. This came out in 86.
I do want to just mention that a movie that I saw this year, AXL or Axel, which is homage to 80s movies, definitely in the beginning is an homage to, a big part of it is an homage to Rad, which, I mean, I wouldn't have really known that, but I saw people mention that. And
I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, I mean, it's not a great movie. It's like, it's not like if you would have saw a movie in the 80s, but it definitely reminded me of watching an 80s movie. But it would have been more of like maybe like not a Back to the Future, but more of like a Remote Control or something like that.
And this one I wouldn't say is the best movie ever in terms of movie. All the aforementioned movies are definitely far superior, but at the time in my life that these came out, and it captures the fashion, like you said, the big hair and the spandex.
Yeah,
all spandex. And then of course you got Aunt Becky was in it, and Talia Share was in it. Mr. Hand was in it. What's his name? Ray.
Oh,
Ray
Walston.
Walston.
Yeah.
So actually a great cast. And I enjoy it. I still like it.
You know, you mentioned the skiing movies and stuff like that. You guys ever watch Always Sunny in Philadelphia?
I've seen maybe 10 episodes.
One of my favorite episodes is they did a half-hour episode that was a tribute to 80s skiing movies, and it's so brilliant, just brilliant. Get a chance to check out the skiing episode of Always Sunny.
Well, I will say also that there was a skiing episode of South Park where they were definitely making fun of those movies. And I mean, because basically like the bad guy was a bad guy for absolutely no reason, like the bully, and his big burn, at least on South Park, to Stan Marsh was calling him Stan Darsh. And he's just like, but it was good though. So check that one out too.
All right, Ryan, what else you got?
Well, speaking of hot dog, that actually made my list.
Did it?
It did. So again, at that age, skiing was a really big thing for me. Having as a young child lived in Colorado, skiing was obviously a national pastime. So I really enjoyed. My older cousin was really into skiing too, and showed me all these movies. So I really enjoyed all the skiing movies. There's all those documentaries by Warren Miller, like Blizzard of Oz, and things like that. So I was really into it. So when a ski movie came out, I was all about it. And then this particular ski movie had a lot of nudity and sex in it. And as a young child, going through puberty and stuff, of course, I was doing what you were doing. Like, what does the rating say on it? Does it have that strong sexual content or the nudity thing? And if so, I'm down. So,
I did that. Just to interrupt real quick. One time I did that. I was looking at the cable guy and I said, "Oh, this movie looks interesting." And I'm, young, impressionable teenager. And I said, "Oh, this one has nudity. I'm going to check it out when the parents go to sleep." And so I turned it on. It was The Clockwork Orange, and it messed me up.
So, still haven't recovered.
Yeah. Great movie, but I know what you mean.
Tim, your memories of Hot Dog, the movie? Is that what we're talking about?
Yeah, Hot Dog was another one that I watched on cable. Probably the same thing. I mean, I watched it a lot, and it's been so long since I've seen it. I don't really remember a whole lot about it, but I do remember what the F's the Chinese downhill.
Yeah, I need to revisit this one. Like you, I remember it was a staple on cable, and I haven't seen it in a long time.
Kamikaze or something like that. His name.
I don't remember, but yeah, probably that sounds like.
I might have to pick this one up if I go to Second and Charles. If I can find this cheap, I'm going to pick it up and revisit it. It's been a long time.
Squirrel was I actually. There's a part in the movie where the character Squirrel is drunk and like going around and like saying inappropriate things to girls on the dance floor, and one girl like throws a drink in his face and smacks him, and then he just like is standing there alone, and he looks the part of being drunk and just starts dancing to Hungry Like a Wolf. And whenever that song comes on, I do that dance. Like it like takes me right back to it.
Why does that remind me of Napoleon Dynamite? Is it kind of done in that style where he's just kind of dancing by himself?
No.
I got to watch this movie again. All right, what's next on your list?
So next on my list is it's a movie that is came out in the 90s about the 80s, and that's what this was supposed to be, is capturing the 80s as a whole, and that is and we've talked about it before, The Wedding Singer. Should come as no surprise. I like the way they kind of poke fun from in the 80s, Bert and Lonnie were the it couple, and Mia and Woody. And so like when they're talking to the florist and she's like, "Oh, you guys are going to be together forever. I can tell these things," like Bert and Lonnie and Mia and Woody. Or even when he's like, "Hey, psycho, get out of my Van Halen t-shirt before they break up." So those little like subtle, foreshadowing of what actually happened.
The price of DVD players.
Yeah. No, please. CDs.
Was it a CD player? Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. All right. I'm jumping the gun.
Yeah. And so the way that they incorporated all this, and of course the fashion and everything, and the Michael Jackson jacket, and learning the moonwalk and whatever. So, I thought it was very well done. It was a very entertaining movie on its own, and a great 80s homage.
Here's a little clip from the trailer.
Before the internet, before cell phones, before rollerblades, there was a time
Everybody on the dance floor. Very nice, Grandma Molly.
when Robbie Hart was the most popular wedding singer around.
You spin me right round, baby, right round.
Adam Sandler.
Hey, Psycho, get out of my Van Halen t-shirt before you jinx the band and they break up.
And Drew Barrymore.
You're the wedding singer.
How you doing? I'm Robbie.
I'm Julia.
In a story about finding love where you least expect it.
Uh-oh. What? You like her? No, I don't. What do you think of the jacket? I don't know, man. I would lose that glove. You look nuts.
He's more than a legend. The wedding singer.
I said hip hop. I hip it to the hip to the hip hip hop.
Yeah, I love that movie. It's a very loving look back at the 80s, and not only is it my favorite Adam Sandler movie, but I love Drew Barrymore in this too. That might be my favorite Drew Barrymore role. Tim, your thoughts on The Wedding Singer?
I don't know. Maybe I'll have to go revisit this movie because I remember being disappointed with it when I saw it because I was a big fan of like his. Well, yeah, because that was like kind of the first one that he wasn't such a goof. I guess it wasn't such goofy humor. I mean, it was a little bit. I mean, even though it's not drama or anything, but yeah, it's not like Billy Madison or Happy Gilmore or The Water Boy or whatever, So I was expecting more along the lines of that, and I didn't get that. So so I was disappointed with it. But I mean, I didn't hate it, but it just wasn't my favorite out of his. But like I said, I'm willing to revisit it. Maybe because of that, I didn't pay as much attention to it as I should have, and catch the stuff that you guys were talking about. I don't know.
See, that's the exact reason why I think I liked it so much. Is that little Adam Sandler goes a long way, and I like the fact that he was a little bit more toned down in this. Even though he had a couple of classic Adam Sandler moments, like when he's ruining the one wedding, and he's like, "I have the microphone," and just screaming at the dad or whatever. And he had his Adam Sandler moments, but I love the fact that this was a little bit more subdued than normal.
Real life story. I'm not going to mention the names, but there was a couple that I know that eventually, he proposed to her and she accepted, and it wasn't Julia Gulia, but it was as, I don't want to say ridiculous, but it kind of rhymed like that, and so I was like, I'm just going to use the Julia name. I was like, Julia Gulia, that's funny, huh? Totally quoting the movie, and my friend who's was the guy that proposed was like, no, I don't understand what do you mean? I was like, never
exactly
mind.
what the fiance
Yeah,
said.
he did. The only thing was he wasn't doing it in
Yeah.
like as part of the movie quote.
That's
he's like
funny.
So I kind of chuckled to myself because it actually happened.
All right, what's next?
Next up, I'm gonna bring the room down. A movie that, as a kid watching this, was one reason that I never ever in my life wanted to try drugs. It's a super epic tale of the drug use in the 80s and how you needed cocaine to be part of the cool crowd. And that's a movie called Less Than Zero.
Mm-hmm.
And very impactful. And I think they did an amazing job not telling you not to do drugs, but showing you why.
Mm-hmm. My favorite 80s band, the Bangles, had a big hit with Hazy Shade of Winter, which was from Less Than Zero. I'm trying to remember the cast. Who was the cast in that?
Robert Downey Jr. was in it. James Spader was in it.
Yeah.
Andrew McCarthy was in it.
Yeah.
A lot of people. So.
Yeah, and that was a big part of the 80s scene. That, I don't think they really fully knew the hazards of cocaine back then, and it was at every party and all that stuff, and then it became taboo.
Yeah, and if you didn't do it, you were, don't come back. Like,
yeah,
we don't want to hang out with you. So it's a very niche, rich kid, trust fund thing to do.
Yeah, and I remember when the movie came out, a big deal. I remember being on cable a lot, but it's one of those movies, like you said, it's hard to watch over and over and over again because it's such a downer.
Yeah.
So, Tim, you remember Less Than
Zero?
Zero?
Yeah. I liked it too. That was another one that I would watch. I think Robert Downey Jr. was living that at the time.
Yeah, right. There was no script,
and you can tell like that whole era of Robert Downey Jr. movies, along with Johnny B. Good, which is one of probably his most drug-fueled performances. But I love that movie, mainly because of that. But
Anthony Michael Hall said that, I said this before, that Downey calls that Johnny B movie.
Oh,
yeah.
really?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not the greatest movie, but because of Robert Downey Jr.'s performance in it, I really like it. I mean,
I liked it.
But anyway, who's the female in it? The one she was in Lost Boys and the Spare Square and in Seinfeld. I can't think of her name.
Oh, yeah, I know who you're talking about. Yeah,
but I can't think of her name either. But she, looking back, was not the greatest actress.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, I liked that movie also. Didn't have it on my list. I didn't really
Jamie
think about it.
Gertz?
Yeah, Jamie Gertz.
Yep.
That's right.
All right. Was that 4?
I believe that was 4.
All right. Give us another one.
I'm going to have, I mean, there's so many to choose from.
Give me the one I'm waiting on. Give me
all
the
right,
one.
I'll give you the one. I wasn't going to do it, but I'll do it. One of my favorite movies of all time, Coming to America.
Son, I'm just going to tell you this one time.
Yes, sir.
You want to keep working here. Stay off the drugs.
Nice segue from Less Than Zero.
Right. Coming to America, it's one of my favorite movies of all time. There are so many moments where you could quote this movie. It's ridiculous. I quote it almost every single day. Great acting all around, everybody. It's just hysterical. Great cast.
And when we talk about fashion and hairstyles, come on. Soul Glow, Jerry Curls. Is there any greater Jerry Curl moment in movies than the one in Coming
Eric with a Q?
And he would, Eric LaSalle, he was like that 80's douchebag that you'd love to hate. Yeah, classic 80's movie. Another great time capsule. Tim, your thoughts on Coming to America?
Yeah, I love this movie, and unfortunately, it's another one that I probably haven't watched since the 80s.
Wow.
But
it might be one of the top 10 most watched movies for me personally.
Yeah, no,
me as well.
I honestly love this movie, but it's just, I don't know. I mean, it's like I see so many movies, I just don't think about it. I mean, if I saw it in the $5 bin at Walmart or something, I'd definitely buy it and add to my collection. But it's just not one that I really think about. But yeah, I mean, everything about this movie is great. I mean, another thing, every like minor character and so many classic lines and just the whole concept, everything about it. It's fantastic.
Gotta play a piece from the trailer.
Why? Why can't I find my own wife?
We've gone to a great deal of trouble to select for you a very fine wife.
I want a woman that's going to arouse my intellect as well as my loins.
Where will you find such a woman?
In America.
I am Akeem.
It's nice to meet you, Akeem.
I have recently been placed in charge of garbage.
That's good to know.
Oh my goodness, it is you! Greetings, Your Highness.
Who was that?
Eddie Murphy.
Just the man I met in the restroom.
Arsenio Hall. In a comedy fable of royal romance.
When I look at these contestants for the Miss Black Awareness pageant, I feel good.
Apparently, these are the best women Queens has to offer. Pick one and let's go home.
Coming to America.
Yeah, definitely one of the greatest movies from the 80s.
And that trailer left out some of the greatest parts.
You're right.
Didn't have anybody from the Mighty Sharp.
Right, the whole barbershop thing. No Randy Watson.
Sexual talk.
Right. Yeah. So there was a lot left to be seen in the movie.
Yeah. So for some reason, is it like the what year was that out?
19. I have it here somewhere. I want to say 84.
Okay, well,
88. 1988.
Okay, I was going to say then. So
yeah,
because it's the 30th anniversary of it.
Oh yeah.
A lot of stuff has been popping up, like they're doing those pop up McDowell's restaurants,
right.
and I like so wanted to go.
Yeah. So did I.
And
yeah, that would have been cool.
They had like the menu looked very interesting. It did.
They have the Big Mac. We have the Big Mick.
Yeah, and it looked fantastic.
They have the golden arches. We have the golden arcs. All right, Tim, we got about 15 minutes left in the program, so let's get to your list.
Okay, like I said, I mean, when I was compiling my list, it was more along the lines of what epitomized the 80s and the look and the feel and all that. So my number one is actually a movie from 1983, and I believe it was one of Nicolas Cage's first roles, and it is Valley Girl.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, he was a punk rocker, and she was from the Valley, obviously, a Valley Girl. And they got together, and all their friends were telling them how it wasn't going to work, and they were trying to make it work and whatever. I mean, but you got all of that, the verbiage from that movie. Gag me with a spoon and gnarly, and I don't even know what else.
Yeah.
But, you know, the funny thing was, you know, people might have said those words when I was growing up around that time for maybe a couple months, and then it was gone. But, you know, maybe it stayed that way out there. I don't know. But,
Yeah. You know what? One thing that a lot of those 80s movies have in common is the amazing soundtrack. And Valley Girl had one of the best movie soundtracks ever. I believe the song Melt With You was popularized in that movie, and it was just a phenomenal soundtrack. And a lot of those 80s movies had that like made the movie was the soundtrack when you think about it. So
I believe Nicolas Cage was still going by Nicholas Coppola at the time.
Oh, yeah, for that movie.
I believe he was.
Yeah. He was also in Fast Times, right? Didn't he have a small role in Fast Times at Ridgemont High?
Yeah, he worked with Brad at All American Burger, I think. Right?
Ryan, what are your memories of Valley Girl, if any?
I remember the cover box because I worked at a movie rental place growing up. So
that was it. You never saw it?
I might have, but if I did, I was young and just don't remember it.
Yeah, I mean, you probably would have missed that whole era anyway. I mean, when people were like,
I know the Valley Girl talk.
Like that,
I know I was around for that, and I knew the Gag Me with a Spoon and all that. And like I knew all that, but I never. The movie slipped past me.
Yeah, and I only have a vague recollection of what the storyline even was. I don't even remember.
That's really all it was. He was like a punk rock dude, and she was from the Valley, and I think they met at a party, and they ended up dating, and like everybody was, and it was just them trying to stay together, and all the forces working against them, trying to break them up or whatever.
Kind of a Romeo and Juliet thing.
Yeah, sort of.
I just remember a skinny tie with an open chest cut. Leather thing.
That is one thing I want to mention too. Even though like all these movies, like most of them that I'm going to mention anyway, had people dressing certain ways, I don't really remember anybody in high school dressing that way. Yeah. There might have been a couple people every once in a while, but most of the time everybody was still wearing jeans and sweatshirts and whatever, you know.
For those of you who are curious, this jacket that I'm wearing, this members only jacket, is my actual jacket from high school, and I'm actually shocked that it fits me.
What about the tie?
The tie is mine. This is all stuff that I still have from the 80s. Yep. Yeah.
So I'm glad you can still fit in it, because I know I would not fit in.
A little tight around the neck.
Well, I was a baby, so I couldn't. I do remember though the Coca-Cola shirts being really huge.
Oh yeah, that was huge for a while there too.
Yeah, Coca-Cola shirt.
Yeah. All right, good one.
My number 2 was 16 Candles. We already talked about that. My number 3 is, I mean, this kind of goes against what I was doing, but there's just so many things that remind me of just this era and growing up, mainly because of the bicycles, but E.T. from 1982 is my number 3.
I thought about putting it on my list, but because it's such a science fiction-y movie, I decided not to, but I see where you're coming from.
Back to the Future is not?
Yeah, no, I mean, because it focuses like on Elliot and the alien or whatever. But no, I see where you're coming from. I mean, I can't imagine the 80s without E.T. I mean, that was such a huge phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, just, the one guy that had the giant headphones and riding his bike, and you just thought, just the way they like rode their bikes around, and, that one scene where they all like, pull their sunglasses down and they're gonna run. I mean, it just, I'm sure nothing we ever did back then was that cool. But riding our bikes around like the neighborhood, you felt that way. And I think that movie, especially that part of it, really captured that part of my childhood more than like anything,
Yeah, and definitely E.T. is in my top 10 all-time favorite movies ever. Ryan, do you agree that E.T. belongs on this list?
I can't say that it doesn't. It just didn't make my list, but it has a place in movie history. It has its own attraction at Universal. It's generations and generations know this movie, it's hard to argue that you're wrong. It just didn't make my list.
Speaking of that, the attraction at Universal, they need to update that thing. They either need to update that thing or bulldoze it, because I was there a few years ago and they're all falling apart. And yeah, it was, and they don't even do like what they used to do. Like when you walk in, I mean, I was like the only one on the ride. Like you could just walk in, but you could tell at some point it was so popular that you had to like get like a ticket and you had to do all this other stuff. Now you just like walk on and get right on.
Oh, wow.
Not that it was a bad ride or anything, but I definitely, they need to do something.
Yeah.
See, when we went, it was about 3 years ago.
Maybe they've
we had to
updated
get
it
a
since I've been.
ticket, and I don't think they updated it. But
okay,
Ethan, being a younger, he was like 8 or 9 at the time, absolutely loved it.
Yeah,
the
I mean,
whole
I could see
experience for him
Yeah.
riding in the bike with
Yeah.
ET in front, like he just thought that was the coolest thing ever.
I mean, it's cool. I just noticed that some of the creatures.
Well,
you know,
I mean,
some
with
of
the
his family,
technology
they were
that we
just
have
so-
now,
Yeah.
I mean, there could be a way better experience, especially in the bikes. Like you could do something like they do with the Transformers, where it's all, you got the videos playing all around you, make you feel like you're a part of it, because they do a phenomenal job with the Transformers one. So they definitely could upgrade it for sure.
Yeah, that's all I'm saying is they just need to shell out a little money and bring it up to date, or change it to something else. I mean, unfortunately, it's not like ET is still like a big property like some of the other, like Transformers or some of the other ones from the
Despicable Me
80s
was another
that
good
have been able to stand the test of time. But anyway,
all right.
My number 4 is, and I think you and I had talked about this before. This movie came out the same year as Fast Times at Ridgemont High, but I like this movie better, and it's The Last American Virgin.
Oh, right.
It's not really the same storyline. I mean, basically, it's the 3 friends that are trying to get laid in high school, and so it kind of focuses on their trials and tribulations. Unfortunately, it's got a sad ending, but another one that's just got a great soundtrack. They get themselves in a bunch of stupid situations, and that girl too, because I do own this movie and I watched it not too long ago. The girl that was in that movie, that was in a lot of 80s movies, I don't remember her name, but she was a horrible actress.
Yeah.
Looking back.
Yeah.
Really bad.
No Phoebe Cates, I'll tell you that.
No, not at all.
Was there a line in there about
not even close?
Is that the one where they got crabs?
They got the crabs, and then somebody told them that if you jump in, that water will kill them. So then they jumped in the pool,
And the one kid
and then it
says,
made it like worse.
I thought crabs like water is the line that I remember from the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was another staple on cable, and I remember watching that one over and over and over again. But man, it's been a long time since I've seen it. Yeah, Ryan, you have any memories of Last American Virgin?
Vaguely. I remember the pool scene. I remember the using scissors to cut the bra off kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
Random small parts like that, but did not leave a lasting impression on me.
All right, Tim, what else?
All right, my number 5. This was my go-to movie in the 80s because of the adult situations that it featured. And it's from 1982, and it is The Beach Girls. Ever seen it?
Drawing a blank on that one. No.
One of the girls that I believe was dating one of ZZ Top, because she was all in their videos. I think he probably got her this part. But anyway, what it is, standard 80s fare. Her uncle is going to be like out of town. So he gets her and her friend to come watch their house that's on this fantastic beach. And it's an amazing house. But then they decide to have a party, and then hijinks ensue, and it's pretty much what you would expect. But at one point, they all take their clothes off and jump in the pool, and there's a lot of that in there. And you guys should check it out. Well, actually, I can't say that because I haven't watched it in a long time myself. But that was the movie. If I knew that was on cable, I would find a way to watch that movie, no matter what.
Yeah, I can't even comment on this one. Ryan?
No, I'm looking at the pictures on IMDb to see if it triggered any sort of memory. It doesn't at all, which is weird, because it had boobs in the 80s, I usually tuned in.
I missed this one.
Yeah, you guys did miss out.
Because I know, but there's a ton of those beach party movies.
Yeah, just a ton of these. But I think this one rose above, was kind of the cream of the crop, at least to me back then.
Yeah. All right, with the few minutes we have left in the show, we talked about most of the movies I wanted to talk about, but I was talking to my boss, Ian, about our topic, and he goes, "Oh, you're going to mention this movie?" And I'm like, you know what? We need to mention this movie. Let me play a quick clip.
You got a light, buddy?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And your wallet.
He's got a knife.
That's not a knife. That's a knife.
Oh, what an 80s movie. Crocodile Dundee, one of those fish out of water stories I was talking about, how a guy comes over from Australia, is immersed in American culture. Definitely a big 80s movie. And I also want to just throw out a modern movie. When did it come out? 2010 this movie came out, but it lovingly captured the 80s for me. And I thought I was going to hate this movie. I don't think I saw it when it came out in theaters. When I eventually got around to seeing it, I just love this movie.
You don't think it's a little weird, a bunch of guys just piling up in a big bathtub together?
It's called male bonding, okay? Haven't you even seen Wild Hogs?
What the hell happened last night?
Is there some kind of retro thing going on this weekend?
There's something going on in here. Dude is rocking a cassette player. Leg warmers. I'm sure there's a good explanation for all this. Jerry girl! Excuse me, miss. What color is Michael Jackson?
Black?
Winterfest 86!
I don't understand how we back in time.
I'm so scared.
Must be some kind of hot tub time machine.
Then he stares directly into the camera. I absolutely loved Hot Tub Time Machine. I mean, when you think about the title Hot Tub Time Machine, I'm like, come on, this would be terrible. But really, when you think about it, it was kind of a modern day Back to the Future. And, with the parents being young and all this stuff. And it was thoroughly entertaining. Ryan, do you agree with Hot Tub Time Machine?
No.
Really? You saw it and just didn't like it, or?
Yeah, I mean, it had its moments, but it may be something I should rewatch. But it's not awful, but not on my list in any way, shape, or form.
Wow. Tim?
Never seen it.
Never saw Hot Tub Time Machine?
No, I wanted to see it at the theater, but it was just one of them that came and went, and I just never got around to it.
All right. Rapid fire. Ryan, got anything we haven't touched on?
Wet Hot American Summer was a great tribute to all the camp movies out there. Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater. It's podcasting in its earliest form. He had a small radio that he did it out of his house and got his high school in a big uproar. Teen Wolf, Top Gun. Got to mention Top Gun. And then Weird Science was another good one. And then I'm going to end on Revenge of the Nerds.
Oh, yeah.
That was a
definitely
huge one for me growing up. Jocks versus geeks and everything that goes along with those cliques.
Yep. Tim, rapid fire.
The only one that I have on here that I think has not been mentioned, well, a couple, but just one of the guys was in my top 10.
Oh, yeah. That's a girl posing as a boy, right?
Yeah, because she felt she got screwed over on some writing competition.
Super nice boobs.
Oh,
yes.
Big reveal at the end of that movie.
Exactly. Red Dawn.
Nice.
Donnie Darko, which is set in the 80s. Tron. That's pretty much it, but I do want to mention a movie that just came out this year with Nicolas Cage in it called Mandy that's set in the 80s. It's more of like a horror kind of weird, bizarre thing, but it is definitely set in the 80s, and you should definitely check it out. I have it on Blu-ray, so if you guys want to borrow it.
I thought one of you guys were going to bring up Trading Places. I thought Trading Places, because of the whole financial stock market thing, that's another 80s.
But you go Wall
movie.
Street for that.
Right. But
yeah, I mean, there's so many.
Yeah, this
we
list
could run down.
Was hard to come up with.
Yeah. All right. Good show, guys. Thank you for listening, and we will see you next time on Movies for Dumb Guys.